We return to the book of Ecclesiastes this morning, and we are moving along, let's say that. We're in chapter 6, and looking at verses 1 through 6. Ecclesiastes 6, verses 1 through 6. There is an evil that I have seen under the sun, and it lies heavy on mankind. A man to whom God gives wealth, possessions, and honor, so that he lacks nothing of all that he desires. Yet God does not give him power to enjoy them, but a stranger enjoys them. This is vanity. It is a grievous evil. If a man fathers 100 children, lives many years, so that the days of his years are many, but his soul is not satisfied with life's good things, and he also has no burial. I say that a stillborn child is better off than he. For it comes in vanity and goes in darkness, and in darkness its name is covered. Moreover, it has not seen the sun or known anything, but it finds rest rather than he. Even though he should live 1,000 years twice over, yet enjoy no good, do not all go to one place. Have you ever noticed what happens? It seems like every year at Christmas time after we've opened our presents. We all get excited when we thought we wanted what we made out our Christmas list for, and maybe gave specific hints to members of our family what we wanted them to buy. And we're thrilled to receive them. We can't wait to test them out on Christmas Day. Maybe there are children here, but the children, as I used to remember when I was a child, I couldn't wait to play with the gifts that I got. And quite often, I have pictures when I was a fairly young boy, like kindergarten age or a little older, that my grandmother took, that I was playing with candles and other things on the table, because we hadn't opened presents yet. So I had to have something to play with, because I didn't bring anything along. But there was pictures of me in a cowboy outfit, and my sister got a cowgirl outfit, and my cousins with their presents and so forth. But we were all playing with them as my grandmother had a big 2-story house. And we played on the stairway, or around in the foyer, or upstairs in the 4 bedrooms that she had with our presents. But maybe, unlike me as a child, you're glad to get the gifts you got as an adult. And so you look forward to wearing whatever you got or using whatever you got. But soon those presents aren't as important. Perhaps within a week or two, there's something else you wish you had instead of that, or in addition to that. The old longings have been replaced with brand new longings, the desire for something else which excites us to own. The disappointment of unsatisfied desire is as old as the book of Ecclesiastes. As we come to the 6th chapter of Ecclesiastes, we remember over in chapter 5 last week or the week before, whoever loves money never has enough. Whoever loves wealth is never satisfied with his income. This too is meaningless, the preacher says. True satisfaction is not in having wealth and possessions, but it's a life centered in God and through His Son, Jesus Christ. Real contentment in life comes not in possessing things, but knowing that you're possessed by the Lord Himself, and you're in His hands. Now we come to the 6th chapter of the book, and as we do, we enter into what Philip Ryken in his commentary says is one of the darkest chapters in the Bible. not think that. Definitely one of the darkest chapters here in the book of Ecclesiastes. The preacher now comes to an apparent inequity. Someone possessing great wealth, property, and fame, but he's not able to enjoy any of it. Why is it that a person can gain all that his or his heart desires, riches, honor, family, long life, education, and yet they never find contentment in these attainments? We see it and hear about it in history all the time. We're given two scenarios to consider here in our text. First of all, having wealth but no joy with it, verses 1 and 2. And then having numerous children and a long life but no joy in that, verses 3 to 6. First of all, we'll look at having wealth but no joy. In these verses we observe not only money and possessions and honor come from God's sovereign good hand, but the blessing of enjoying them comes from God too. There are no self-made millionaires or billionaires, even though that's talked about in our society today. Oh, I'm a self-made man. I got millions in the stock market. I invested in steel, or I invested, like Ty Cobb invested in Coca-Cola when it was a fairly young business. He became a first millionaire ball player was Ty Cobb. Although he was a good ball player, he was a rich ball player as well. Well, he wasn't a self-made man. God gave him those blessings because God's in control of all things. So whether a person is rich or a person is poor, whether they do well in the world, whether they don't do that well in the world, comes because of God's sovereign good pleasure. The preacher comes to the conclusion here that prosperity is not always as good as it appears. He's looking at things from a completely human viewpoint. We need to remember that. Remember, he says again, under the sun here in verse 1. So we know he's still looking at things from earth's perspective, from an unbeliever's perspective. And keep that in mind as we go on in the text. From this point of this world, from a man's perspective, there's an evil, something that's wrong from men's vantage point. Martin Luther put it this way: the wicked begin their hell in this life. The man in these two verses had it all. He was not only worth a fortune, it seems that he was even famous from our text. He lacked nothing necessary for a good and happy life, but he had none. Now, there's no equation that riches, possession, and honor equal contentment and joy. We're not given the reason why the man was not able to enjoy what he had. We're not told how he lost all that he had. Some of the writers, commentators say, well, it was wartime, and so in wartime he lost his wealth. Now, thinking of Ukraine and what's going on over there right now, that's the pictures that we might see on the news. We can see what it's like to be at war and see people's homes destroyed, businesses destroyed, people walking around in the rubble looking for possessions that they might have had, or worse yet, people wandering the streets looking for a relative that is missing. Those pictures come to our mind. And war does bring devastation and loss, but we don't know what this text doesn't tell us, how this man went from riches to rags, we might say. It certainly can happen to anyone, rich or poor. Maybe the man was robbed, or he threw up his money away by a risky investment. We don't know. He could have become sick and died before he could retire and enjoy his wealth. Whatever the providential reason, a man who seemed to have everything that he could ever want never had the opportunity to enjoy it. That's what's the picture here. The preacher is giving to us. It was here today, gone tomorrow, and when it left, instead of going to someone related to the man, Solomon writes, it went to a stranger, somebody the man did not know. So he not only never got to enjoy his wealth, he had no control over where that wealth went when he lost it. The preacher calls us not just evil. Notice there's an adjective before the word evil there, grievous evil. He's describing the situation as real tragedy, something really alarming and strikingly wrong that happens far too often in our society. He describes that situation with the words, "It weighs heavily on men." That might refer to the severity of the situation, but I think that Solomon's most likely thinking of the frequency of that situation in human history. How many people go from honors and blessing and fame and riches to nothing, having nothing. And all man's activity is characterized as vanity, as nothingness, and that whatever he possesses he'll leave to others, perhaps even strangers, should make all of us more and more aware that accepting our possessions, one can never bring us lasting joy. They can't bring us happiness, truly. The gifts that God gives and the power to enjoy them come separately to us. And because we have lots and lots of things or lots and lots of stuff, doesn't mean we'll ever live to enjoy them. Or certainly that they should provide satisfaction in our life. Without God or man, a man or a woman will never be content, always discontent. But I imagine that we could pretty much ask many fairly wealthy people in our society, what's your happiness? What makes you happy? Remember last week I said J.D. Rockefeller was asked how much would make him happier. He said, had a little bit more. Well, maybe that's what people would say today. They would be of that persuasion. But some people might say, I'm worried about losing it all. Or that I'm worried about the stock market falling and caving in. Or that the banks will have a run like in 1929, and our money will be worthless, that kind of thing. We should always remember that the fear of the Lord isn't just the beginning of knowledge, it's also the source of satisfaction. Now the second thing we see, we'll pay a little more time to that, is in verses 3 through 6, where we see having numerous children in long life doesn't mean that you're going to have joy and contentment with it. The dark possibility which the preacher considers here is that if you're not satisfied with what you possess, then perhaps you would be better off dead. We sort of saw that before in chapter 5. Given the vanity of life in our sin-cursed world, he concludes that a stillborn child gets the better end of the bargain. As we read from Psalm 127, and then even sang a hymn based on it earlier, we also see in Psalm 127, the last verses of that psalm, sons are a heritage from the Lord, children are a reward from him. Like arrows in the hands of a warrior are the sons born in one's youth. Blessed is the man whose quiver is full of them. They will not be put to shame when they contend with their enemies in the gate. It's interesting to note who the author of Psalm 127 is. If you have your Bible, it might say at the beginning of Psalm 127, Song of Solomon, or Psalm of Solomon. So one of the two psalms in the Psalter that Solomon wrote, one is Psalm 127, the other, I won't tell you to look it up, is 72. I'll just tell you that. Those are the two psalms that we know King Solomon wrote. So in some sense, we can see, I think here in Ecclesiastes, this convinces me a little bit more why I think Solomon was the author than I used to. I used to think that Solomon wasn't the author. Hengstenberg convinced me when I read his commentary that he wasn't the author. Now I'm more convinced that he is the author. But if you look at Psalm 127 and then look here at Ecclesiastes, you can see some correlation. One of the ways is that we see here that Solomon uses the same word, vanity or vainness, that he used in Ecclesiastes 1:2, there in Psalm 127. The word appears 3 times in the first 2 verses of Psalm 127. Meaningless, meaningless, says the teacher utterly. Meaningless is what he wrote in Ecclesiastes 1:2. But here we see it's vain to rise up early and go to bed late, and vain things that he mentions here in Psalm 127. What Solomon is saying in the psalm is the same that he says here in Ecclesiastes 1. Apart from God, there's no meaning to anything man does. Not even building a family has meaning apart from God being at the center of your marriage and establishing a home. Not even having many children, as we're going to see in a moment. To the Jew, having many children, building a family home was one of the great blessings in life. And we see that especially with women in the Old Testament. You remember how Rachel desired in her marriage to Jacob to have children, even bargaining with her sister and her nephew to be able to have children. Samuel's wife, our mother, Hannah, desired children prior to have Samuel, and she saw it as a gift from God for her to have a child in Samuel. Judges 8:30 says Gideon had many wives who bore him 70 sons. He was considered rich just on that alone as an Israelite. Didn't matter how much money he had. I got 70 sons. Oh, that means you're going to be in business for a while. You've got men to work for you. That kind of thing. I think of my son Aaron working in Idaho, and he's got his oldest boy, Caleb, working for him. He's got 2 more boys, and I expect that someday, when those boys are older, they're working for their dad. If not only to help the father's business, the family business. So we see that in Gideon. We know that Solomon, Rehoboam, Solomon's son, fathered 28 sons and 60 daughters for a total of 88 offspring. And he was blessed in that. And we could go on and on. But in a culture that rightly considered children to be a blessing from the Lord, this hypothetical man mentioned in our text fathered 100 children. Surely he would have been blessed by God as far as the culture, society, the Church of Jesus Christ, or the Church of God at that time, Israel, would have thought. Even more so, he lived for many years. Verse 6 marks him at more than twice the age of the oldest human being, Methuselah, who lived only 969 years. Now, this might be hypothetical when he said, though he should live 1,000 years or twice over. But, and so I expect that he may not be talking about one certain person, but he's talking about a situation. The translation of the NIV, which I'm using, doesn't give a literal interpretation in verse 3. The New American Standard has a good interpretation. It says, his soul is not satisfied with good things. The word there really is in the Hebrew, soul. So it's the man's soul is what the Old Testament Hebrew really says. In other words, it was the man's soul, his inner being, which was dissatisfied. Something was missing in his life. One commentator says there was a hole in his heart. That's the way we probably should think of people who have wealth and have no God. they really have a hole. You're not a whole person. You've got a big emptiness in you if you don't know God. So he pictures death as here in his description now. He goes a little further. He pictures the death of this man as dishonorable or a bad death. What happens is he dies an unmourned and unburied death, it sounds like. Think of how we used to hear about people when they were alcoholics or drug addictions and they died. They were found on the street or field or wherever it might be, maybe laying on a bench that they frequented. They don't have a name or anything, so they have a potter's field, or they have a field for people that are nameless, homeless, and they just bury them there. Dishonorable burial, some people would call it, even though others would say, no, we're trying to treat that person honorably by burying them that way. So that's what the preacher is talking about here. He died in such a manner that maybe his body even rotted in the desert or was eaten by scavengers. He doesn't tell us the details in the text. He could have died in battle, or perhaps he was despised by his family, but they abandoned him, so he died homeless himself in the end. Because remember, he's lost everything. The fact that he was not given a proper burial would lead people to conclude that he was under the curse of God. Something like the Lord Jesus, although we know why Jesus was cursed. It wasn't because of his lifestyle, it was because Jesus became a curse, bearing our sin. But the fact that he was not given this burial, he departs this life unnoticed, unlamented, and unfulfilled. It's that way of thinking that the writer is telling us about. Now think about this hypothetical situation. Solomon goes on to consider non-existence. So we have to say something about his mentioning the stillborn child here. He writes, I say the stillborn child is better off than he. A miserable life, a miserable death are so bad that it's far better than a person never be born. Maybe this comparison is not so shocking. We already have seen it before, earlier in the book. Most anyone would think that to never be born is terrible. We don't rejoice when a mother loses a child, even if it's a stillborn child. We truly care about that person. We mourn with them. It's sad, it's lamentable. It's a loss that not only the mother feels, the father feels it, the siblings feel it, grandparents, other relatives, friends and neighbors. While I was at General Assembly in June, our state clerk's daughter lost her firstborn child while she was still carrying that child. He was so upset, he left the General Assembly, and the assistant clerks took over so that he could go be with his daughter. And he was a grandfather, and yet it affected his life. So, why do we think that? Why do we have such thoughts about the stillborn? Well, first of all, we wonder what would they have become? Would they have been a husband or a wife? Would they be a mother or a father? Would they become brilliant scholars? Maybe a Supreme Court justice, or a person who discovers a cure for cancer or diabetes, or invents some heart medicine that is far better for treatment. Who knows what their life would have been? So that's the thought that we have when a stillborn child is miscarried. Now here he says that being stillborn is better off than being miserable in life and in death. The death of a miscarriage means the child's name is covered in darkness, he says. Not that the child never receives a name from his parents. We shouldn't think that. But because death shrouds its identity and personality and the child's character and abilities, in that sense, the name is covered in darkness. The child never gets to see this world, though it never saw the sun or knew anything, he says there in verse 5. Someone's written, better to miscarry at birth than to miscarry through life. A child stillborn never has to experience the problems, the frustrations, the pain, the suffering, the struggle with sin in our world, guilt, and the curse of this world. Best of all, a stillborn child finds rest, Solomon says. The child enters a place of the lack of conscious awareness that death brings. He's probably thinking here of the grave rather than going to heaven, just that the body goes into the grave. For this reason, the stillborn is better off than the living who find no joy in life despite having everything they could ever want. Solomon, remember here, is looking at things from the view of this world, from under the sun. He's leaving God out of the equation. He's not thinking in terms of life after death. But when believers are buried, and when they bury their little children, even infant babies, even stillborns, it's always in the sure and certain hope of the resurrection. So we have to remember that as God's people. Solomon says, from the earth's perspective, a disaster. It's tragic. In fact, we may even know parents of a woman who loses a child and never recovers. We had a woman in our church. She was a special needs woman in her 30s. She carried around the only child that she had ever had. She carried around a dead child's picture. It must have been like she made that child out of wedlock, obviously, maybe in her teenage years, early 20s. But I remember her showing that, taking it out of the person, showing us, showing me at least, that picture. Never left her memory. And so we know that can be that. But for us who know the Lord, to lose a child, it's like David saying, as he does when Bathsheba and his child dies and goes to be with God. He said, I'll see that child again. David had that assurance. He was talking about a child born by sinful action. So God did not punish that child in the sense that in taking that child away from Bathsheba and David, he took that child to glory, and they would see that child again. And we remember always that we have that hope as godly parents. That when we lose our children, they're with the Lord, and we will see them again. Finally, the preacher asks, do not all go to the same place. He's not saying that everyone who dies ends up in heaven. He's speaking to the fact that everyone who dies goes to dust. They decompose and their bodies all return to the earth. We say at the graveside so often, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. That's what the preacher's talking about here. He determined it was far better for a stillborn child to return to the dust than for the person who has everything in this life that life can give him to be unhappy and unfulfilled. To have lived 50 years, 70 years, 100 years, 1,000 or 2,000, as Solomon mentions, and never to have enjoyed the good gifts of God is a tremendous waste. Better to have died never experiencing this life and being miserable than to have lived a long and prosperous life and never to have attained all that one possessed. And that's what it's like for those who look from under the sun, what goes on in this world. But we have to remember wealth itself is not evil. People can read this passage of Scripture and say, if you've got wealth, you're, as the disciples remember talking to Jesus about that. And Jesus talked about the camel going through the eye of the needle. Because the disciples asked him, about rich men getting into heaven. But Jesus didn't say that no rich men get into heaven. He didn't say it was completely impossible. It was just that it was difficult. We know, we have good examples of rich people in the Bible. We don't know about Adam, but he lived to be 930 years old and fathered many children. By an Israelite's assessment, Adam was a successful and wealthy man. Then we know Seth, his son, his third son. He lived 912 years and had a number of children. Methuselah lived 969 years and had many children. Noah lived 950 years and had sons and daughters and repopulated the earth. Abraham was made a great nation, as numerous as the stars and the sand of the seashore. We Gentiles are children of Abraham. And Abraham was one of the richest men of his time. Probably lived during the time of Job. To mention Job, we have to remember that he's called the greatest man among the peoples of the East. The Lord made him prosperous again and gave him twice as much as he had before. He died old and full of years, according to the book of Job. So let us not say, oh, Solomon was depreciating wealth and having possessions and being blessed by God. No, it's not true. And then we read a little while ago about Joseph of Arimathea, and we believe Nicodemus may have been a man of certainly prestige and was part of the Sanhedrin. So he may have been a man of wealth too. So we know that to name Joseph of Arimathea, who was willing to give his very expensive cave or gravesite to bury Jesus. And we saw in previous weeks, looking at Mandoan's tapes, that that tomb could have been completely desecrated, becoming a place where there was no family there. Although I think that was probably different because of Jesus. But certainly Joseph of Arimathea was being very generous with what he had. Well, the point I'm making is that wealth in itself, possessions, honor, prestige, many offspring, and long life, can be a wonderful gift of God. So we should not despise riches. I see some of the ads for campaigning and all, and how certain campaigns now, one candidate will disparage the other one because the other person happens to have homes and money and wealth and so forth, and got a blessing from God, and then the campaign is trying to say this person squanders money, this person has more than they should have, and all. And of course, the person I'm thinking about is a socialist, so obviously he's talking about a Marxist philosophy that he has towards his candidate or the man he's running against. But here we can see from Scripture that being wealthy is not a sin. It's a blessing from God. Especially a blessing if you have God with it and you know how to use those means that God has given to you. So to enjoy this life, you must be ready for the life to come by trusting solely in what God did to redeem you from sin and give you everlasting life. And no matter how long we live, how much of this world's money and the goods we possess, it will all be meaningless vanity unless we enjoy it by God's grace and His power. I think we need to keep in mind one of the great Negro spirituals that goes, "The world is not my home, I'm just passing through. My treasures are laid up somewhere beyond the blue. The angels beckon me from heaven's open door, and I can't feel at home in this world anymore." That really is to be the Christian's attitude towards wealth in this world. It's not the world's treasure that are most to be coveted, but the treasure that God provides to those who trust in Jesus and live to please Him in this world and glorify Him. We need to ask the Lord to make us happy in Him, loving Him for His grace and salvation. And don't put excessive value on enjoyment on what you own. It really isn't what you own or have that matters at the end. The important thing is not what you own, but does God own you? Has Christ died for you? Have you the riches of grace bestowed on you through Jesus Christ? And that's the important thing. Know your Creator and Redeemer, and have Him empower you not to be possessed by what you have, but to ultimately be possessed by your God and Savior. Amen. Heavenly Father, I pray this day that we value what you are to us and how you own us more than what we own. We pray, Lord, that we would see the devaluation in the sense of what we have in light of glory and what awaits us in heaven. You told your disciples, who said they had left everything to follow you, that they haven't lost anything, that they would receive far more in glory. And so, Lord, we should be having that same mindset that you taught your disciples. That, Lord, we have nothing to take with us when we die. These are all gifts that will perish, that they will go to someone else, as we've been reading here in Ecclesiastes. These are things, Lord, that are given for our temporal benefit. But, Lord, we are not to put our confidence and hope and enjoyment and desires in these things. They are to be in you and you alone. So help us, Lord, to do that. We pray in Jesus'